Certainly good to see each and every one of you here this morning. It's a wonderful day that we can come together and remember what our Lord has done for us and use that as a motivation to continue to live for Him each day, reflect His love to others. This morning I want to go over a passage which is very beneficial, very optimistic for our lives. And it begins this way. It's in Proverbs chapter 3. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. That sounds to me very optimistic, very positive. And he continues by saying, let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and men. That all sounds very optimistic. Why does God want us to remember His instructions? Some people think that He gives His instructions to just take all the fun out of life and to burden us with a list of rules and regulations that we must keep in order to avoid the wrath of God. But remember, He says to prolong your lives, to give you peace and prosperity. That sounds like a blessing to me. So he continues by saying, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. Make your paths straight. And He's not talking about literal paths, but He's talking about a meaningful, prosperous, peaceful life that is not a crooked life full of crisis. There's three things that we need to do based upon that passage in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. We need to, first of all, trust the three things. We need to trust, there we have it, in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Here's the second one. Lean not on your own understanding. And in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight. So there's another term that is used 4 times in these verses. When we look at it, you can see it. Trust the Lord with all your. There you have it. Now it's like at first the writer is writing to his son, is instructing his son that he was to do this, but now it's our responsibility to use whatever He has, like trusting, leaning, acknowledging in our lives. And whenever you look at the background, the basic meaning of that word trust, it has to do with confidence. We get our confidence in God. It builds security and safety in our lives. And I want us to be that way. And really, whenever we look at the Proverbs, they picture life with word pictures. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Or like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land. And so we can see those pictures there. But what would be a good picture of trust? Well, I've got one. We see in this picture, it's a very good picture of trust. And what we see here is a hanging glider. We see that this guy is going to go hang gliding for the first time in the Alps. And here his harness is attached. His isn't. Now for us to trust, to get a sense of confidence and security and safety, we've got to trust in God. We've got to be attached to God in order to do that. If we're not, life can be very, very difficult. So on his first day of vacation in Switzerland, this man wanted to see the picturesque scenery. Hang gliding off a 4,000-foot ledge was his idea for doing so. And since he had never hang glided, he hired a pilot. However, stepping off the ledge, he and the pilot realized they had made a critical error, double-checking his safety harness to make sure it was attached to the glider. He clung to the glider for more than 2 minutes after taking off on a flight promising a great view of the Switzerland's picturesque scenery below. But what he got was on his first day was a vacation with 134 seconds of terror, of sky-high terror. I read things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. And so many people can clutter their lives with trivial things that contribute nothing to health and well-being. And what they leave out in their lives is trusting in God. Now, I think that just gives you a picture of how dangerous that can be, of not trusting in God. We need to trust in God. The man unattached affects life without trusting in God. I think the guy that's attached seems to be doing much better, don't you? But he says, upon impact, my right wrist, he did live through it. But upon impact, my right wrist suffered a fragmented distal radius fracture, which required surgery. Well, the pilot made a critical error in our pre-flight setup by not attaching me to the glider. He did all he could to get me down to the ground as quickly as possible, and while grabbing onto my harness and flying with one hand. So in Proverbs chapter 3, Solomon gives us 3 things that we must do in life. 3 things. And we've seen trust, lean not on your own understanding, but on God's understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He'll make your path straight. So the background of the meaning of the word trust is you get confidence by putting your confidence in the Lord. And you get a sense of safety and security in your life when you trust in Him. Now, why does God give us His teachings? The hang glider scene vividly depicts the kind of life that people have without trusting in God and using His wisdom. So why does God give us His teachings? Well, at the very beginning of the book of Proverbs, He kind of gives an introduction. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and judgment to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. Let the discerning get guidance for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And so why does He give this to us? Why has He given us these teachings? So that we can do what is right and just and fair. Do what's right and just and fair. And remember, He says that it prolongs our lives. It gives us peace and prosperity as well. Proverbs chapter 2, we see another reason why He's given us these teachings, because He cares about us. For the Lord gives wisdom and understanding. He gives us this wisdom. From His mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For He guards the course of the just and protects the way of the faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. And so we can see here that God, He guards our lives. Why does He do that? Because He cares about us. He guards us. And how He does it? One of the ways He does it is through wisdom, the discretion and understanding. And He does this so that we can have a victorious life. That indicates to me that God really cares about us. And so we see, as we look through this, that He gives us His teachings so that we can have a victorious life, so that we can have a peaceful life, and so that we can have a longer life. God's like a wise father, and He says, I instruct you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. In other words, the path of victory. He gives us his instructions, his guidance, his commands, his directives. And he provides us all of these so that we can have an abundant, victorious life. The guy on the hang glider had life. But I wouldn't want to live the way he was living for those 134 seconds, would you? That was life. But who wants a life like that? I would much rather be attached and have a sense of security and safety and more confidence. And we have that when we trust in the Lord. And so that's victorious living. Now, the peaceful life that he mentions, he describes peaceful life in this section of Proverbs. And he does it because he cares about us. And so he says, whenever you look at Proverbs chapter 3, verse 13 and following, blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is like a tree of life that you embrace. And when you lie down, he continues by giving this about this wisdom that he's giving, that when you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. And how is it that happens? Well, earlier in verse 21, he says, my son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. If we have wisdom and understanding in our sight, then we can lie down and not be afraid. Lie down and our sleep will be sweet. The best example of that is Jesus. Because that's exactly what he did. Remember the event on the Sea of Galilee and the storm arose and he was sleeping on the stern? Mark records it this way, that there were also other boats with him, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? Why did the disciples wake him up? Why did they have to wake him up? Because he was sleeping, and his sleep was sweet. And how could he do that? Because Jesus could not get away from wisdom and understanding. It was his wisdom and understanding. He could not get away from it. And that's how he could sleep during a storm like that. And so if we can just keep wisdom and understanding in our sight, that will make a difference for our lives as well. So he gives us victorious living, peaceful living, and longer living. We see this in this passage. And again, think about God caring for you and for me. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through wisdom, your days will be many, and years will be added to your life. If you're wise, your wisdom will reward you. And how can we be wise? Well, we're going to take what he gives through wisdom, and if we take it and practice it, then we'll be wise, and the wisdom that God gives will reward us. And so again, there's three things that we see in this passage. We're to trust in the Lord. We're to lean not on our own understanding. And we're to acknowledge him in all of our ways. So again, we see trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Leaning on your own viewpoint can be exhausting. Someone wrote this, that people think of all the possibilities they can chase down. When they hit a dead-end street, they back out quickly. They try another street. They hit the brakes. They still haven't resolved anything. And so someone else has come up with this little recipe. Some people try to put a dash of panic, a pinch of fear, add a tablespoon of worry, 3 cups of anxiety, and a handful of pills, which sounds like a mentally exhausting recipe, doesn't it? Man says, Why trust when you can worry? Why trust when you can worry? God says, why worry when you can trust? And so Peter puts it this way, cast all your anxiety on me because I care for you. Or cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. By doing this, we find that the guidelines for our perspective based on God's wisdom and what we can do instead of being anxious and worrying, if we just lean on God's understanding for support. That makes the difference. We start by putting his commands in our hearts and minds and then using them. For example, he instructs us to go to the ant. It's a very practical way to trust. And whenever you begin to research all the ants, there's a variety of ants. There's a certain kind of ant out there called paramedic ants. A new study reveals that after a raid on a termite nest, the injured ants are cared for by their comrades. They're carried back to the colony. And in the colony, they are taken care of. They take their legs and their mandibles, and they hold the other injured ant's leg, and they lick it. And they do that for several minutes. We've got some researchers that have really looked at this. And they lick it for several minutes. They've also noticed that when there's ants that are injured and that doesn't take place, then they almost all die. But those who are treated in this way, only 10% die. And so when Solomon says, go to the ant, consider its ways and be wise, well, boy, that is some way, isn't it? And one of the ways that I think about when I'm just thinking about that aspect of the wisdom that we can see in ants is this. Again, God cares about us. And what we see in all of this is this. Blessed is the one who is kind to the needy. Whoever is kind to the needy honors God. And whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And you can see those are the verses. Right there, 14, 21, 31, and 11, 25. And then he also says the wise person teaches others how to live. Well, how do you teach them to live? To be kind. That's the message I'm getting right there. To be kind. Here's a good example I just saw in the news of using the wisdom of kindness during a terminal illness. During a terminal illness. It's not a happy moment when a person is diagnosed with a chronic disease or a terminal disease or whatever the disease is. It's not a happy moment. Coping usually becomes difficult, and support from others is very important. A 12-year-old boy, Jaron, has decided to devote himself to supporting children with cancer. And he can help in two ways. He can help with collecting money for a cure or to directly help and care for these kids with cancer. The cure involves money for research, and the results, you can reap the results way in the distance. But whenever you're caring, you can help immediately. And so this 12-year-old boy decided to do that. And there's more to his story, but he was inspired by a 12-year-old girl. They never met. But this 12-year-old girl, Jessica Joy Reese, was diagnosed with brain cancer. And it was inoperable. And she lived for 10 months. But instead of looking inward, she looked for ways to help other children who were diagnosed with cancer, who needed courage, who needed support. And so just 3 weeks into her ordeal, she asked, how can we help them? She and her parents that night, they came up with the idea of joy jars, named after her middle name, Joy. And so they would use plastic jars and they filled them with toys, games, activities, along with a special note and a bracelet. And her motto, inspirational message was NEGU, which meant never, ever give up. And later, after her initial diagnosis, tests revealed another brain tumor, which made her chances of surviving about 1%. So what'd she do? Continue to do this very thing. Her motto was still never, ever give up. And she wanted to pass that message to others with the joy jars. And her idea did not end. It spread through the Jesse Reese Foundation. And people using joy jars have now encouraged over 50,000 children nationwide and beyond. Back to Jaron. He saw that he could help others in that way, but he was especially motivated because his mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she died just a few days before her 42nd birthday. This was last year. So he wanted to help in that way. He got his younger brother to help and his dad to do the same thing. And it's kind of like this other proverb that was written, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's what those that 12-year-old girl did for that 12-year-old boy. And here's what God says. Well, this is Proverbs 19:22, but this comes from God. What does he desire in each person? What is desirable in a person is his or her kindness. That's what it desires. And so we see these three things. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. So what is the straight path? Well, again, just like I've gone over, if discouraged, encourage. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. When Paul writes to the church at Thessalonica, he says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Now, what does Jesus say? Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You'll find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Does that sound like kindness and love? Yes. Albert Schweitzer, who was a doctor and a missionary to Africa, he said, sometimes our light goes out, but is blown into flame by another human being. Each of us owes deepest thanks to those who have rekindled this light. We can look at others, try to be a rekindler for them, doing so through kindness. But it all involves trust, doesn't it? Trust in the Lord with all your heart, because that, again, that's the sense of security, safety, confidence. That guy was so confident he was reaching out to try to help the guy who wasn't attached. But that is a picture of someone who is not trusting in God. Not that this guy, I don't know anything about this guy's background. I just know what this looks like, and it's a picture of not trusting in God to me. So let's trust in God. And let's lean on his understanding. And let's acknowledge him in all of our ways, all of our decisions, the things that we do. And what does he say he'll do? He'll make our paths straight. If you're subject to the invitation of Jesus this morning, if you haven't met him in the waters of baptism where he meets you as your master, your savior, and he'll wash your sins away, or whatever might be your